in a position here where he can be a check. Why is the grand jury a separate power? Very simple. You take all of the people in the executive branch of government. I understand there are over 20 million people now who work for the federal government in one way or another, and most of them are in the executive branch, the administrative branch of government. You take all of those millions of public servants. You take all of the congressmen. There's 435 congressmen. There's 100 U.S. senators. Take all of their staff. Put them all together with all of those judges on the federal bench at the district court level, the appellate level, and the U.S. Supreme Court. You can take all of that conglomeration of government, put them all together, and you cannot find the power. They don't have the authority to indict anybody. What is an indictment? They didn't teach you that in the government school because they didn't want you to know. In the Declaration of Independence, again, it says, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Deriving their just powers. Where do they get their unjust powers? They get their unjust powers also from the consent of the governed, but they are getting unjust powers from a misinformed or disinformed public out there. The people are not informed, and so they are giving their consent. We have grand juries that are not functioning up here where they belong. They're down here because they don't know their authority. Now, suppose that we have one of us, one of our countrymen here. He is a very productive American. He's a small businessman, perhaps. He's got a machine shop or something. He's a craftsman. He takes great pride in being a productive American. And I want you to pay particular attention to the fact that the IRS, they never harass the unproductive. It is only the productive in this country who are being harassed. And the productive, you see, are a minority. You see, you've got all of these government servants down here. You have all of the welfare. You have all of the people that are getting a government check, and there's over 50%, they tell us, that now get some kind of a government subsidy or whatever. The productive individual is a minority. You are not going to be able to control anything with your vote on election day if you're a productive American. It is not going to happen. So, we have a productive individual, and he's up here. He's one of us. And he, at some point, decides that he has suffered enough. He says, every April 15th, I have to write a check to the Internal Revenue Service, which is nothing more than a fine, a penalty for being a productive American. And he says, I've had enough. I've seen all of this waste. I have seen in my local newspaper about the Air Force buying $2,000 toilet seats and $5,000 coffee makers, $350 hammers that he can buy at the hardware store for $10. He says, I just can't afford this kind of government anymore. And he quits filing. He gets himself informed. He gets himself a soapbox, and he gets up on the soapbox and he tells his fellow Americans, say, hey, we have a criminal government. It goes for 4 or 5 years, and he becomes more active. He's doing the radio talk shows. He's writing letters to the editor. He's passing out pamphlets and books. And he gets the attention of the Internal Revenue Service, and they're down here in the executive branch of government. They say, man, we've got to silence this fellow up here. I call him Mr. A. He's a grade A American, and he's up here, and he's speaking out, which is his right and his duty. He's speaking out. The IRS, they go to the U.S. Attorney's Office, who is also down here in this executive branch of government, and they decide that they want to prosecute Mr. A, but they cannot prosecute Mr. A without the consent of the governed. So they have to come up to the grand jury and get the consent of our representatives on the grand jury. They're supposed to be representing us, not the IRS, not the government. They're supposed to be representing us. Now, when your state legislature, when the Congress, when they pass rules and regulations, say your state legislature, they create traffic laws. What do? Do they just write them in the book and forget them? No. When they write a rule or a statute, they send out their employees. They send out the highway patrol, don't they, to enforce the statutes that they create, the speed limits and all the rest, right? Now, whenever they write law, they send out enforcement people. When we the people wrote a law, the Constitution, who did we send out there to enforce the law we wrote? That's what these people are there for. They're our special law enforcement people, our special law enforcement representatives. They're on that grand jury. And they're supposed to be enforcing the Constitution for the United States of America and making these people down here comply with the law that was written to govern them. Very, very simple when you recognize that we are up here above the Constitution, the grand jury's above it, and these people are there to be law enforcement people, not a rubber stamp in the hands of the Justice Department or a federal judge. These people here, when they come up here to ask for an indictment against Mr. A, they listen to the evidence, and then they tell the U.S. Attorney and the IRS, they say, now you go back to your office, servants. They need to exercise their authority. They need to make sure that that U.S. Attorney and the IRS understand that they are the boss. The U.S. Attorney and the IRS, they're public servants. And so they dismiss them. Now, they say, do we want to indict Mr. A? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check out the IRS code. Now, that's down here because it was created by our public servants, right? So the case in the statute law, it's all down here at the bottom because these people are the creators of it. So it's down here. And so they say, is the IRS code, is it in compliance with the Constitution for the United States of America? Well, you have some informed people on that grand jury because they're up here. And so one of the people on the grand jury says, well, you know, he says, I have a real serious problem because Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution here, it says the Congress, these people here, that they shall have the power to lay and collect taxes. This grand jury person says, I have a real serious problem with that because Article 1, Section 8 says that the Congress shall collect the taxes, and I find that the IRS is over here in the executive branch of government. This seems like a clear violation of the Constitution for the United States of America. So the grand jury, they discuss that and they say, you know, that makes sense. The Congress, they're the ones that spend the money. And the founders, they figured that out. They said, if the Congress spends the money, then they should be the ones who have to collect it. The Internal Revenue Service office should be a part of your local congressman's office. Your congressman and the IRS, their offices should be in the same building right together. So that if you have a problem with a particular IRS agent, you just tell that IRS agent, say, well, I'm going to go talk to my congressman. So you go over across the aisle and you talk to a staff member over there that is in the staff of the congressman, and you say, staff member, come with me. We have a public servant over here that is completely out of hand, and I want you to make a correction over here.